All right, here we are. And the date is, what is the date? March 15th? March 15th, 2021. We're here at the new venue for Drinklings, the new venue for VFF, the forthcoming Rabbit Room.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be the Rabbit Room, I think.
I think this is a good choice.
Assuming we don't get in trouble with copyright.
What is the backstory?
Well, you can spell rabbit differently if you want to.
Yeah, no, worse. Rabbit Room is a place in the Eastern Child called the Rabbit Room, where like Lewis and Tolkien did all their kind of stuff. So
it's for the Inklings.
we want to have like each room be a different room. So this is going to be, again, copyright stuff. So we have to like call and figure this stuff out or get a lawyer. But Rabbit Room here. That room's probably going to be called Spare Room. Spare Room.
Nice. I love that.
And then there's the 143 room, which, if you know Mr. Rogers, there's the 143. I love you.
Yeah, it's good.
143 room. So.
I love it.
What's here?
Like Mr. Rogers from the Neighborhood?
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
It's a mixture.
Have y'all seen that movie? That one, that Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen it? Yes. Is it good? I haven't seen it. I just used to love Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
It's good.
It really is a beautiful movie, and at one point Mr. Rogers literally stares at the audience instead of at the person he's talking to, and you're like,
Brace the fourth.
literally feels like,
Wow.
it's pretty.
Let's all
wow.
take 30 seconds to think about if anyone's ever loved you or you've ever loved someone deep, something like
He's
that. And then he
talking
just
about
looks
how he was hurt by
at,
his
he's looking
father.
at, the camera's focused on the audience.
And you're like,
Wow.
he's staring into my soul.
I've never seen the movie. I just used to love Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as a little girl.
It's not really so much about Mr. Rogers. It's
Yeah.
more about the guy he's basically like ministering to.
Oh.
A really wounded, it's kind of based on a true story, a really wounded reporter of sorts, and
Okay.
who has a very tragic relationship with his father. And
Huh.
Mr.
Did not
Rogers
know that.
basically counsels him through it, and it's pretty beautiful.
That's awesome.
All right. So, walk us through timeline for this, Randy. Walk us through what's gonna transpire.
Yeah, so we're going to be done there in the first week of May, and then we're going to be closed for 3 weeks, so we'll have to figure out something for VFF during that time. Which the place could probably still be used, but we are going to be closed. So probably the first week of June is our goal to be open. So we just bought this a week ago today, actually.
Wow.
So it's been a lot of demo work, a lot of smashing through walls and stuff like that, which is the crazy thing for me because I'm like, are we like halfway there? And we're like, no, not anywhere close. So we're excited. It's gonna have a drive-through. We're gonna have that whole. If you guys peeked out the back, there's that whole green space back there. That's technically not ours. We do have like up some of the property, but the city's given us opportunity to use like that stage and the gazebo, and basically like we kind of get to use it for different things. So I'm thinking concerts.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about with the seminary about bringing Josh Garrels down, and that's like we fill this place out with 200, 300 people. Have a heavy metal band that's trying to contact me, which we're probably not going to bring in.
Heavy metal.
I wish you would. I just got so excited.
Heavy metal Christian band.
No thanks.
Nice.
I will not be at that concert.
Disciple.
Oh, I don't like the sound of that.
Is it Norwegian death metal?
They're from the 80s. They were like.
We don't do metal, but if there's a rock
Yeah.
band, we want to be a rock band here.
So, yeah, we're pretty excited, but it's a lot of work.
It is.
So, if anybody wants to volunteer for some work,
I was gonna say, how often are you here? When would you need some help?
like every day or every other day.
Weekends too?
Yeah.
I could
Forever.
probably come help on some weekends. I'll send you a message.
Send out a message to everyone too.
Yeah, send out a message and say. So I'd love
We
to
could
come
do
on
a
weekends.
BFF like work night.
Oh, I love that.
No, we could definitely do that.
I love demolishing things. That would be
Well, it
so
looks
fun.
like he's already gotten that
Great
wall.
girl right there.
I would love to just smash their system.
I am not so much on demolishing.
I
Yeah,
believe
we're
it.
almost through all the smashing and stuff like that, so
Was that fun?
that is a lot of fun. It's all plaster too, so
Ooh.
a lot of, yay. There was a lot of smashing. house too. Like if you walk through there, it slopes and like it's kind of crookedy and
I
stuff.
love that.
So
But we'll bring pressure washer over.
yeah, we need a pressure wash. We want to build out that deck a little bit better. Do something out back. I do want to have like a section for pipes and stuff like that we can do. Maybe a couple
Who's
of-
mainly been helping you with it? Have you been paying anyone to help, or you just been having friends help, family?
One of my employees has been helping a lot. April's been helping a lot. We've had some friends.
Just come help.
A lot. We had another 3 or 4 people coming this week.
It's awesome.
We can also, move outlets and things like that.
That's nice.
Steve knows how to do that.
We got to figure out how to get this popcorn ceiling off and
Oh,
make
man.
that
Scrape it.
Yeah.
because it's got to be wipeable.
So
It's refreshing.
I'll tell you 2 options of that. One, hire a guy to put a skim coat over top of it. That's probably the easiest. The other way is you spray it a little bit and scrape it, and you spray it and scrape it and spray it and scrape it.
Yep.
So those are the options.
We got some mud guys that make them do that.
Yeah, and even if you scrape it, then you still have to mud it anyway because you're going to make nicks and gouges in it. So the easiest thing, the cheapest thing would probably be just skim coat it so you can paint it. That's what I would do.
But it's like a 120-year-old house.
That's awesome.
That is so.
It used to be the postmaster for that train, so people will get off that train and then
What the heck?
come up here
Oh
with
my
their
gosh.
van.
The history. You need to have some kind of write-up that you put somewhere in here. You know, like how places like historical things.
Yeah.
You need like a plaque that says
Bronze.
what this house has been before.
Yeah. It's got some cool little artifacts and stuff like that too.
As I said, put like a little plaque up when you walk in so people know. That's so intriguing to me.
So this feels really. I like the feel of this VFF here. It's especially when we have paraphernalia on the walls and things like that. So
Yeah, we're gonna ask everybody in Wilmore or friends of the shop to also bring. We're gonna turn this into a book room. So just old books, like we don't want like
Yeah.
gardening for dummies and
No.
stuff like that. But we're basically gonna ask everybody to like take a book that they really love and write in the flyleaf of the book like a message to whoever is gonna pick up the book and why this book is important
Awesome.
to them and like that and stuff like that. What they want to dedicate it to, and then put it on a shelf and just let it be something that other people can come in here and honestly just like pick up books and chill and read.
Are you happy?
I
I can tell.
this we've not seen.
That's
happy
good.
or anything in a while.
See happy
I know.
This is good.
2 years built up.
It's so good to see it.
Yeah.
I like seeing that smile.
So excited we get to be a part of it, VFF.
I
And we get
know.
to be here right now. It's so awesome. Before,
Yeah.
we
I
get
mean,
to
this
just-
is. Well, I think the coolest thing. I don't know if you want to share this, but
Well,
You're
But-
going to, so.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing, but another part of your dream is coming true. One of your missional things you've had for a while about the farms.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of what we're going to do while we're gone for 3 weeks is actually go to Puerto Rico and actually scope out a coffee farm.
What?
That we're thinking about basically being like a sister company with, so we'll actually import beans.
Wow.
So,
And that's one of the things you talked about me a couple of years ago.
since we
was-
began, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, I want to go to different farms and cultivate relationship with those
Yeah.
farms.
Let's
So
go
it's
to
actually really cool
fruition.
because that's where we'll actually probably just shift our missional kind of stuff into doing that. And we just shifted like 2 weeks ago from being coffee with a mission to coffee for imagination and fellowship, which really brings together all various different streams and I think fits and coheres a lot better. And so for that, it's like we get to really build programming around that.
Yeah.
That's one of the benefit of having these like 3 separate rooms and stuff like that is actually you can, functionally shut doors and give people like Bible study opportunities,
Space.
band opportunities,
I wonder if you can do like a
reading group stuff. We want to maybe do some house church stuff here.
I would join.
I love house
And then do all sorts
I
of
will
different
move my
stuff.
letter to
We want to do like a Harry Potter read through for like an entire year.
Come on.
Where somebody like is gonna actually like orchestrate this for an entire year and guide people through that discussion.
I was gonna say, please let Nina start with that.
What?
Harry Potter read through for a year.
Yeah.
I'll be on that and the Corey Tenbo one.
I think it would be awesome if you came and read through Harry Potter. You're Her voice is
I was
so
gonna
good.
say she can narrate like nobody's business.
I don't know how many books she's read to me in the car. I'm like,
I
pause.
didn't used to be able to do
Okay.
Just like you get on Audible.
Yeah.
I didn't used to be able to do reading out loud. When I'd read out loud, it would make me yawn.
Oh really?
I can't explain it, but
You
You
did a
want
great
to
job
have a
now.
weekly fairy tale reading. Like people can bring their kids and sit down and we'll have somebody read.
Yeah.
You know,
I like it.
McDonald or something like that.
dreams come
There's
to
just not
fruition.
places like this, you know. In Lexington, there's a million coffee shops, but there's none that are facilitating that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's for me. It's like
Yeah.
we were going back and forth like on community. Like, and I was like, I hate the word community.
Oh, yeah, me
It's
too.
so overused. It doesn't mean anything. And it's way too broad for what I think that we want to do. So we're like, what's the difference between fellowship and community? Fellowship is a whole lot more intentional. It's a whole lot more specific. And
Yeah.
where you have fellowship, you have community. But where you don't have community, doesn't mean you don't have fellowship.
Yeah.
Now, what's really cool, I think this is really cool, is Randy asked me to come up with a punchline, with a tagline, and I came up with something very similar to what he came up with, and I thought that was kind of cool that we were both thinking about. He's like,
I
"You're-"
asked you to do that.
yeah, you said, that's why I sent you that text, because you said, try to come up with something, and so it was this, so when I boiled it down, I started with broad, and I narrowed it down, when I got down to it, it was imagination and conversation was what I had, and he had imagination and fellowship.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And so it was.
What are you doing with that inlet there?
Either that wall's gonna go, or it's gonna just be like a little reading cubby.
Because it could be just a light. That's the rabbit room. Fireplace.
Can you send that to me?
Yeah. Everyone look at pass around. Because I'm like, that literally
Take one,
would
pass
be
around.
exactly the same.
So that's literally it. I mean, that's
I mean,
That's
granted, it looked different with different furniture, I'm sure.
that is the rabbit room.
That's the rabbit room. And because it was a private room back in the day.
It actually was part of the house.
Okay.
The owner just let them go back there because they
That's awesome.
wouldn't be with the customers.
You got exterior brick right there too.
I was like, you put some dark wood right
Oh
there.
yeah, look at that.
I
Send
was,
that over to me.
oh,
By the way, I'm happy a lot of the other times to. just,
listen,
I
I've been
resonate
living in
deeply with
stress
Randy.
mode for
No, that's what we're
2
saying is
years.
you can tell that there's
when dreams
the
come
weight
to
coming
when
up.
dreams come to fruition, things happen. I think in our
there's a
spirits.
scripture for that, isn't there?
Oak of earth makes the heart sing.
But when
Tree of life.
when it's fulfilled,
Yeah, when it's fulfilled, it's a tree of life.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it brings joy. So I think all of this actually ties into what you were mentioning about fellowship and imagination, all the things you're bringing here. Actually brings us into, this is a great segue, brings us into the page 24.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. Now, I know I said in the email that we were going to try to pick some passages and go, but as I begin to try to pick passages, I begin to pick whole chapters, and I said we're just going to read, and then when we get to the end, we'll just read the last paragraph, and we'll close it up.
Okay.
And if you haven't read it, and that's your fault. You've had plenty of time to read it. So this is just fantastic.
What do you say?
Because it is just fantastic. All right.
Wait 1 second before you start this.
Oh, that picture.
Can we?
That picture shocks me every time.
Have you seen this?
Yeah, you showed it to me, and it looks
Just
nothing
before
like it.
before we start, I just need to show you this.
That does not look like Wes. Like nothing like Wes.
I know this has nothing to do with
Have you
Solzhenitsyn,
seen-
but I feel like we all need to see this.
Do you think that looks like him?
No. I can't tell if
Have you
it's
ever
the,
seen?
Yeah, I can see it.
the glasses, but also I feel like you normally wear a
I
hat.
mean, I can see it, but he has
That's
changed it.
What is it? Show me the
Immaculately.
picture.
What's on his shirt? Is it one piece?
Oh,
I mean, what's on your shirt?
I think it's something like Paisley's.
Oh,
Yeah.
Paisley's, that's the thing.
Look
Have
at
you
that
ever
little
seen
peach
the
fuzz.
show
Yeah.
Freaks and Geeks?
Give us that same
Remember
kind of
Bill?
look. Maybe I'll see the same.
What, who?
Bill?
I don't remember the names. I loved that show though.
Is that it? Is that
You're
it?
They
just
finished
much
it.
more-
They
Petrified of the
finished it
camera,
far
or-
too soon.
You're much more
You told the
smiley
camera.
these days.
Do you know why I didn't smile in that picture?
Why?
Why?
Because I had a
Well, you had a
snaggle
chipped
tooth,
tooth.
and I didn't smile because my front tooth, my parents wouldn't get it fixed. So from
They had insurance and they would not.
sixth
fix it.
grade until I was
That
until I
sucks.
graduated, I
They were
had a chipped
buttheads.
tooth. And it was
Parents
it
are
was
good.
it was massively like half my tooth was missing.
True.
That's
I've chipped my
heartbreaking.
front tooth before.
Wes.
I know that feeling.
Nice.
It does look. I mean, I can see it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's me.
Who's that person?
Freaks and Geeks.
No, I don't know if I know.
Oh, well, that was
Oh,
before your
it's a TV
time, but
show.
it was very good, and it was like only like
18
two
episodes.
seasons, one season,
I
whatever it
was in
was.
it. I was in
Claire
it.
Danes, right? No, that was the other
Uh,
one.
Who's the girl that plays in Marvel?
Sorry, I kind of took us off track, but I just felt like that needed to be seen, so we
I
can
don't know
go.
why it needed to be
It
seen.
just
Right.
popped up, and I was like, we have to share this. Like,
I don't know why I needed to be seen. All right.
All
Page
right.
24.
Carry on.
Solzhenitsyn.
Solzhenitsyn.
It's
So,
a good page right there. Page 24.
whew, isn't it?
Yes.
To page 25 is kind of crazy. We are not going to flout the right of the artist to express exclusively his own personal experiences and observations while at the same time paying little heed to everything going on in the rest of the world. We are not going to make a demand of the artist in this respect. Instead, we will reproach him, ask him, appeal to him, and coax him, for this is allowed us. Usually, after all, he develops his talent on his own only in part. He is endowed with most of it ready-made at birth, and along with his talent goes the responsibility for his free will. Let us grant the artist that the artist owes nobody anything. It is still painful to see how he can, by retreating into the world of his own creation or into the open spaces of subjective caprice, leave the real world in the hands of mercenary people who are often totally insignificant as well as sometimes even out of their own minds.
That right there says it all.
I mean, so Oscar Wilde says that we should make art for art's sake. But I think we can look at the world and say art is much more necessary than for its own sake. I wouldn't trust Oscar Wilde to make a moral statement anyway. But he did. I think he also approached love that way, because there's the quote where he talks to Robbie Ross, which was his lover, his male companion. And he said to Robbie towards his deathbed, and he said, Robbie, did you ever love any of those young boys for their own sake? And Robbie said, no. He says, me either. Get me a priest, because only the blood of Jesus can wipe away the stains and sin this heinous. So do we make art for its own sake, or is there a place for art? Is there a purpose for art? So Solzhenitsyn asked the question in the very beginning, explain what art is. Now he's going to bring it in here. Does anyone want to read the next paragraph?
We're all looking at me.
Yep.
Okay. Where am I reading from?
Right there.
20th.
Just tell me when to stop. Our 20th century has turned out to be crueler than those that went before it. Nor did everything horrible in it end with its first half. Those same caveman emotions, greed, envy, unrestraint, mutual hatred, which, as they moved, assumed such high-sounding pseudonyms as class, race, mass, or trade union struggle, are tearing our world apart and reducing it to chaos. Caveman unwillingness to accept compromises has been elevated into a theoretical principle and is considered to be a virtue of orthodoxy. It requires millions of victims in endless civil wars. It keeps drumming into our hearts that there are no stable and universal concepts of justice and good, that all values are fluid, that they change, and that this means one must always act as suits one's party. Any professional group, as soon as it finds a convenient moment to grab something off, even if it has not been earned, even if it is unneeded, will right away grab it off, and society can fall apart. The upward and downward oscillations of Western society, as seen from outside, are approaching at both extremes that point where the entire system will be unable to return to a state of stability and must fall into ruin. Violence, continually less restrained by the confines of a legality established over the course of many generations,
Lot to unpack there. Anybody, what jumps out at you? What is something that strikes a chord that resonates with you in that? Let's just throw out a word, caveman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since we're talking about art and we're talking about, so what is he referencing? What is the image he's trying to paint with the language of caveman? Because like Lewis, Solzhenitsyn does not have time to waste words. He had to hide manuscripts. He had the Gestapo, basically not Gestapo, but it was the same thing as Gestapo, breathing down his neck, constantly watching him. He had to write in secret. He had to write it out. He didn't have time to write fluff. Every word had to be precise because he's under constant threat. So why does he choose caveman or cavemen? What are some thoughts when I say that? What provokes from caveman?
Well, he talks about it. I mean, he talks about greed, envy, unrestraint, mutual hatred.
Yeah, and those are, we would consider those more base instincts, right? C.S. Lewis says...
But they're also survival instincts, too.
Yes. So C.S. Lewis says, when self becomes aware of self, it suddenly becomes selfish, right? How do I protect myself? And Jordan-Peterson talks about that once you become aware of your limitations and how you can be hurt, you then also know how to hurt others, right? And so we have this caveman thing of, I need this stuff. This person has it, but I need it. Well, I know how to hurt them because I know how I can be hurt. And suddenly you have this greed thing going on. There's also something else very interesting about the caveman. How much art do we have from Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon man and the Pilt man and all those? What art do we have from there?
Not much.
Very little.
That we know we have some cave drawings, like fossils and things. So it's interesting that he paints the 20th century cavemen going greed and base instincts and trade unions and what else did he mention up there? He mentioned the very top of the page. He's talking about
Race, mass,
Trade union,
class.
yeah, race mass.
politics and all these contemporary things. Art wasn't mentioned in there. Literature wasn't mentioned in there, that they're chasing after these things that are, and which is very base. It's very base.
I think, kind of in connecting your first point with this point, I would say arguably there's no greater sense of self-consciousness than when you are being threatened, or a sense of that you actually exist as when you feel threatened, because all of a sudden everything turns in on you, whereas throughout normal days we're kind of lofty in our heads in different places and we're thinking about this and that, but once you feel threatened, that's where all of the primal instincts, it's all about survival. It's why you go back to your reptilian brain, and your sympathetic system is just on overdrive, and it's like when the self is threatened, you don't have time or space to allow for anything else other than survival techniques.
Because everything is relevant. You don't know what next move you can make. It's like being dropped into a jungle. You're dropped in a jungle. You have no supplies and no resources. You're dropped in there by yourself. Well, what move do you make? Well, you don't know. Is the tree next to you poisonous? Is there an animal that's going to bite you? You don't know which way to go because everything's relevant. So you're over in hyperdrive because you're worried about survival.
And art can't save you. Reading can't save you in those moments physically.
Right. Yeah. So it's not until things become irrelevant that you're like, oh, I'm sitting in this room. I'm sitting in this room. I can let down my guard because no one in this room is going to try to put a bullet in my brain or try to attack me. So that thought can now go into the background and run irrelevant. And then the more things I can push back to irrelevancy, the more I can become introspective and think about beauty, and those things can come in. And then you can actually paint masterpieces, and then you can think about transcendent things and transpositional things. But when you're just a caveman trying to survive, then that doesn't go. And so if you're just in this life trying to survive and trying to make a dollar and trying to push for whatever evil things that you're trying to push through, whatever consumerism you're trying to do, then it's the dog eat dog thing. And you're just worried about survival. And then the first thing that goes is art.
Right.
I think that's the opening line about the 20th century. It was one of the cruelest centuries in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And yet we had all these great advances in science and in medicines and philosophies, and yet it was the cruelest. And Nietzsche said it would be. He said it would be. He said it, because we've killed God, this will be the cruelest. There'll be mass murders and things that happened in the 20th century because we've killed God. And you go, oh, he's
This
right.
part where it says, it keeps drumming into our hearts there are no stable and universal concepts of justice and good, that all values are fluid, that they change, and that this means one must always act as suits one's party. Any professional group, as soon as it finds a convenient moment to grab something off, even if it has not been earned, even if it is unneeded, will right away grab it off and society can go fall apart. I was like, it just feels like today.
Yeah.
Feels so relevant.
I think you mentioned art going too. I think you still also see in that reason and rationality go too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's short-term reason and rationality that I think works, and so you're saying if you're feeling threatened by something, envy, greed, selfishness, those kind of things, anger, will work for the immediate circumstance.
Yes.
As in the case with parties and stuff like that, looking short term, I mean, you look at, for example, if we're talking about the 20th century, right, like Nazism, like that worked for a few years, but long term, nobody actually was able to think long term, how is this actually going to play out? Do we actually have enough grounding here for this to actually work? And so, yes, it worked for a short period of time based on the principles of envy, greed, selfishness, destruction, all of that.
Which I think ties into bad philosophy.
Yeah.
Like what you were talking about last week, like KKK. Let the KKK be the KKK, because eventually it's never going to build enough momentum because it's bad philosophy. I feel like that kind of ties into that.
Because it's wrong.
It's
aim.
wrong.
It's wrong aim. You're aiming at the wrong thing. So you can't create a sustainable, flourishing society if you don't have the right aim. So what's interesting is he can see this back here because he knows what's coming, because he mentions it here in just a second when we get to it, but there's nothing new under the sun. This is how it is. So when we reach for these things, like Randy said, it's not sustainable.
When did he write this?
And this was this 40 something.
I thought it was 70s.
I'm sorry, 70s. Yes,
Because I feel like
72.
Lewis wrote about things like this too, far before
and
this,
yeah.
and it was similar. Like it's like we're constantly going through the same things, and it just feels like we're in utter moral collapse in our society. I mean, Corrie ten Boom talked all the time about this. This is the end times. Many people think, and I hear people saying that all the time now. Oh God, Christ is coming back, and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like this keeps happening. So I don't know when he's coming back, but
what is this actually? From what you're saying, Randy, this actually brings in the notion of: is there a philosophy that takes into consideration the perpetual suffering and the perpetual depravity of man, and offers a way out where man can't? This is saying man is trying to save himself and he can't. Mm-hmm. Is there another way that we can be saved in spite of ourselves, not because of ourselves? And you look at that, and the cross offers you that and says, yeah, you'll never measure up. Your aim is, why is your aim always bad? Why is our aim always bad? Paul tells us we're bent. We can't shoot straight because we're bent. We're always going to be off. But if we aim at Christ, he'll take the crooked stick and make a straight line out of it. And that's what the cross does for us. And that's why, when I'll be having a bad day, or we'll be having a bad day, and we think everything's over with, and I think back to the end of Last Battle. This is the art and the title. Like, I haven't even started my first chapter of living yet. This is not even. And so you can take somebody like a Solzhenitsyn, you can take somebody who are on the gulags, you can take, as Viktor Frankl said, people went to the gas chambers with the name of Adonai on their lips. Enjoy how? Because they didn't give in to their baser self, but they knew that there was something transcendent above that they could put their faith into, that this wasn't the end. If you think this is the end, then yes, you will do that because you have to survive.
Which I think is really interesting when you see that when people don't give into their base instincts in those moments of being where you really should. Those moments where you should be animalistic, you should be fight, fleeing, or whatever. And I mean, quintessentially in the cross, we see that, but we also see that as art, strangely enough, and beauty. Or when you see those kind of things, especially in like film or song, you see that as art and beauty, where somebody is going to the gas chamber saying Adonai, right? There's something beautiful about that, you know, really is the pinnacle of beauty, you know?
Yeah. And I have this in my car actually right now. There's something that J.K. Rowling did that Peterson is blown away by. He said, I don't know where she got this from. He says, the only time I've seen this image was in a ancient manuscript that very few people have ever seen, and I have it in my book, but that's the only two places I know that it exists right now. And it's this idea of the snitch, the golden snitch. He says, it is actually the actual drawing of the illustration is actually the ancient sign for wisdom. He goes, she's brilliant how she did this, and I think this is why we need to have a rolling thing, because she probably will wind up being one of the greats because of the archetypal truths in her writing. But he says, inside of this, you're playing a game, and the game is to score the most Quidditch points, and to stop the other person. That's how you win the game. Or
you get the golden snitch.
So if you search for wisdom, you win.
Yeah.
No matter what else is going on, no matter whatever the rat race or whatever game is being played over here, there's a meta game going on inside of that game that if you find wisdom, you automatically win. You've defeated the game by playing a different game. He's like, it's brilliant. That's what happens when Christ comes. That's when you accept Christ, you win. You don't have to play the game out here. You play the meta game that's actually transpositionally more real than the real game, and you automatically win. And you go, oh, and it takes you out of that. So you can look and say, gas chamber, so what you want is you want to kill me. That's fine. I get to go, as Paul says, I get to go on, and you get a handful of ash. I get the better end of the deal, you know, because you're playing.
Harry called the Seeker too. Isn't that what he's?
Yes.
That's cool. I did too.
I think I didn't even put that together. Wow.
That's like the name of the.
Very good.
Position. Yeah.
It's a new position.
12 points to Gryffindor.
12 points. Yes. Are you Gryffindor? Are you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be Slytherin.
I'm Slytherin.
You know, everyone says
I'm
they
not proud
want
of
to
it.
Slytherin just to go against the grain, but really, at the end
You
of the
think
day,
people
there's
want
no one
that?
good in there.
I feel like people don't want that.
There's no one good in there. I mean, maybe in the Cursed Child, Malfoy becomes a little bit better.
Really? Does he?
A little bit.
Have you read the Cursed Child?
I haven't read the
It's not great, but it's okay.
The last 3 times I've taken it, I've been Slytherin. I've not told anyone because I'm not proud of that at all.
Eliana
At
got
all.
Slytherin too.
Really? I'm not proud of that because I hate everyone in the house.
The only way I can think Slytherin would be a good place, like, I can make a change here. I'll make a difference. What are they? They savvy? They're sneaky? I don't know. What are their
Snakes is
traits
what they
again?
are.
They're cunning.
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 Shrewd. Yes. All right. Who wants to read next?
I can read.
Go for it.
Where am I?
Top of 26.
Okay. Nor is it merely brute force that triumphs, but it's triumphant justification also. The whole world is being flooded with the crude conviction that force can do everything and righteousness and innocence nothing.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. there's a phrase called might makes right. Okay? Force can do everything, and righteousness and innocence nothing, which is exactly the opposite. It's the opposite game. We need to forcefully do this. And actually, no, you need to let go. But letting go wins the game. Not. Go ahead.
Dostoevsky's. Dang it, I
You
just
did it.
practiced it too.
I practiced it. That was good. I mean, it was, good.
Dostoevsky's devils, who seemed a provincial, nightmarish fantasy of the last century, are crawling under our very eyes through the whole world, even in countries where they could not have been imagined, by the hijackings of airplanes, the seizure of hostages, and the explosions and conflagrations of recent years. They are signaling their intention of shaking and annihilating civilization, and it is quite possible that they may succeed. Youth, at an age when it has had no experience other than sexual, when it does not have behind its years of its own suffering and its own understanding, rapturously repeats our discredited Russian bywords of the 19th century while imagining it has discovered something quite new. The newfound degradation of the Chinese Red Guard movement is accepted by the young in every pretty detail as a joyous example. Superficial is their lack of understanding of the age-old essence of humanity. Naive is the faith of their inexperienced hearts. Now we will overthrow these greedy and savage oppressors and rulers, and then we who take over from them, have putting aside our grenades and submachine guns, will be just insensitive. Don't you believe it? And those who have lived their lives and who understand, many of them at any rate, those who are able, if they wish, to refute the young, do not dare to refute them, but even flatter them and fawn upon them, will do anything so as not to seem to be conservatives. And this again is a phenomenon of the Russian 19th century. Dostoevsky called it enslavement to progressive fads.
Is he talking about the last 20 years here in the States?
It's just heavy because I feel like he nails so much. There's two things in here that youth at an age when it has no experience other than sexual, when it does not have behind its years or of its own suffering in its own understanding, rapturously repeats our discredited Russian bywords of the 19th century while imagining it has discovered something quite new. Communism didn't work last 100 years. This generation is like, oh yeah, we're going to do it right this time. They didn't do it right. They messed it up. They didn't do it right. I hear this claim too with atheism. There's no, atheism's good. You haven't done it correctly. But we'll say, well, communists, they were atheists. Yeah, but they didn't do it right. We'll do it right. Even so, Lewis says in Why I'm Not a Pacifist, he said, if you decided as a nation, so if we decided as an organization that we were going to all be passive, and we voted on it, we would be passive for about 5 minutes until another rogue organization would come in and take us over, because we were telling them, we're not going to fight, we're going to lay down our arms, and they'll be like, oh great, it's more land for us. And this next generation, they come in and they think, because they have a little bit of information, they think they have wisdom. And I've said this so many times. They look at what has been given them with disdain, and they're like, I could do it better, not knowing the cost and the price of what came before and how hard it was to get. It's the entitlement thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't use that word loosely. I use it like they feel like they're entitled because they have this bit of information, but it hasn't been earned, and so they don't know the cost. Oh, we can just take this thing down.
You say the earned wisdom you always talk about.
Yeah. And the other thing is, now we will overthrow these greedy and savage oppressors and rulers, and we will take over from them, having put aside our grenades and machine guns, and we will be just and sensitive. We are the benevolent dictators. Just give us control, and we will make your life great.
Is he saying that's what they're saying?
Mm-hmm. So the head of Davos, I don't remember his name, but one of their main missions was one of the number one things: you will own nothing in the 21st century, and you will love it. And you go, who's going to own stuff? Well, we will own stuff, but you won't.
Klaus.
Yeah, Klaus.
Yeah,
Yes, Klaus is the guy who says it.
How can they fulfill that kind of? I'm sorry. What are the right words? How can they enforce something that they themselves do not live by?
Well, it's the language of the villains. It's what Schiff says.
That's why I never understand why people basically are like, yes, let's do that. Because why does this group of people, why do we basically bow down to what they say? Well, they know what's right for us, but why? Why do they know what's right for us? What's good for us?
Do they?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, it happens again and again.
Because there's dispossession.
Or do
Control
we-
and dependence. I mean,
Do we wear people down so much that, I mean, what did Hitler do? He was like, they're in poverty, they're struggling, and he's like, we'll give you everything you need. You just need to trust us.
He created an enemy.
He created an enemy
yeah, I mean, everybody wants to be out of debt.
and promised all of these things. If you do this, I will give you this. Just trust us. And I'm just like,
And aren't
faith in the
people
government.
intoxicated by prominence too, or people who are like higher up? They think that they know better if they have more power.
Facilitating hope.
I was gonna say, I think the root of it is security. I think people want to be secure always. It goes back to what you were talking about, Randy, of why do we react so self-preservatively? That's the word, self-preservatively.
Sure.
Like, why do we
we'll
do
accept it.
Why do we do that? And I think it's because we want to be secure, and if we do that, we will feel secure. Like whatever, at every ounce of opportunity cost to someone else, it gives us one more ounce of security. And so I think
Well, we
people-
think less of ourselves, though, because we're like, they're smarter than me, so I should.
it's counterintuitive, but
If we search for comfort,
we'll find
We're always
neither
going to hire
comfort
the
nor
confident
truth.
politician. We don't hire the ones that aren't narcissists.
Yeah.
They're
That's
all
what's on
narcissistic,
the-
and
Yes.
and that's why we had
It's a
checks and
confusion.
balances,
Yes.
because we want ambitious people to be in charge of politics because they actually have the energy for it.
Right.
But we need to limit their power so they don't become malevolent.
Right.
And that's why the checks and balances were there, is to say, oh, no, you can only go this far.
But it comes to a point where we don't question. Like,
Yeah,
I remember
unfortunately.
our neighbor, with the Wendy, the dog. What's her name? In Lexington. Anyways, her name doesn't matter.
Yeah. Sorry, it's
But she
trying
was
to tip my
she was
tongue.
Catholic, and we were having a discussion about
Peggy.
something. Peggy. We were having a discussion about something. She was a professor at UK. Anyways, she can't remember exactly what it was. It was just, and it wasn't against me, but it was something was occurring within the Catholic Church, and she said, "Why are they questioning him? He's a priest. He has far more schooling and understands Scripture better than we do."
Wow.
And I was like, I just remember thinking, I do not want to put that much power of religion into a man because,
Anyways.
Well, I think we
Can
do
I
it.
throw something in after you're done?
No, I think we look at RZIM as a classic example
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, I mean, he held position, and when people challenged him, they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever.
or you have people that said no, he's
Yeah.
correct.
I think there's another flip side that I think we do see very rampant in our culture too, which we're a confused society. As is usually the case, we, do both things, and I think we have also developed this culture, at least in the West and at least in America, of questioning and being skeptical of anything that's going to claim to be an expert
Yes,
as well.
I
So
agree
it's
with
this
that.
weird paradox where, yes, we put these people in charge and we kind of give assent to it, but at the same time, we're like, well, who are you? Who are you, Mr. Professor, to say? And it's like, well,
But why are
I
we
believe
skeptical?
This.
Why are we skeptical
Why are we skeptical of that person or of the idea?
of the idea?
Because I think let's take theology, for example. like, and you know this from politics and everything, because our identity is so wrapped up with things that we believe. When we feel like somebody is questioning that, feel like they're also questioning a part of ourselves.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think.
Absolutely.
And that's a big shift. I mean, you see a lot of people go into crisis of faith over little doctrinal
Yes.
things, you know, that are like, this really isn't that big of a deal, and yet it's going to completely.
That
push you
becomes
down
the
a
biggest
position.
thing.
It becomes
I asked
the
that
biggest
question just because I think that's true, and I also think we question and are skeptical now more than ever. Because I mean, I don't know now more than ever. It seems like it's always been the same
I'm
thing.
reading a book about 1776, and no, we are nothing has changed.
I think it's because we are so often lied to, and then later on, we all believe it for a period of time, and then we're like, oh my gosh, they lied to us.
Right.
Those in charge, whether it's the media, the government, whoever, those who are experts. And then you see experts in the same field who have the same amount of credentials next to their name, and they completely disagree.
Right.
And so we're all left like, who do we believe? And then there's people telling us, just believe this because this expert said this. I'm like, I don't know if I can anymore.
Right.
So
And it's hard.
if we step back on it, let's take a step back from this issue and go, okay, why do people hold the beliefs they hold? And one of the reasons that they hold the beliefs they hold is because either one, their behavior has informed their philosophy, and then their philosophy reinforces their behavior, and that behavior actually has been somewhat successful to a bit flourishing. Now you're going to come through and say, no, you're wrong, and you're going to take away a pillar that they've been standing on, a bit of certainty they have, and you're going to say, I'm going to take that away. If you take that away, they don't know what's behind that. They don't know what's going to happen when they get rid of that belief, because that belief has held them in a certain stasis for 20 years, and you're going to say, no, I'm taking it away. Well, like you said, their identity is wrapped up in that. Who are they? If this is wrong, who are they? They've been a fool their entire life. Who do they believe? What do they believe? And suddenly it's this big tidal wave of chaos. And so it's one of the reasons why, shameless plug here, in URI, that we don't want to choose sides. We don't want to tell you what to believe or go, here, believe this thing. It's like, no, here are the tools. Don't pick a side. Don't choose a side. Find out, because both sides lie. All sides lie. There's truth in there, but you're going to have to work for it
Hashtag all
sometimes.
sides lie.
All sides. Conservatives bloviate and pander just like the left. So it's...
Also, I think, like what you were saying, we listen to these people and they say, this is how it is. You should follow this if you are a good person. And all of a sudden, they're no longer, it's like we were talking about politicians, they're no longer saying, this is what we think is going on. We understand if maybe you don't trust her. There's no humility. And I think we question anyone who has no humility. We say, why should we believe someone who doesn't question themselves at all? And I think that...
Because it's weird. We have relativism on one side where we're like, well, don't question anybody's beliefs because they're all legitimate. And
My
then
truth.
On this other side, it's don't question my beliefs because my beliefs are the right ones.
And yet, who are we? I'm always most attracted to people who are willing to say, I might have this wrong. Or, let me hear your idea.
This is why I say, I think every Christian should be an agnostic.
I agree with that 100%.
You know,
Help me. What?
as should anybody else.
Explain.
An agnostic is someone who, like, you believe there's a God, but you don't know everything about
We
it.
Okay, I
demonize
understand.
agnosticism.
Yeah.
But when you define knowledge as incorrigible, basically, that you can't, it's unfalsifiable.
Right.
Then you set people up in these places where their identity can be wrapped up in this.
Yeah.
I mean, think
I think that's
about.
why people turn from, especially Western Christianity, because they don't have that freedom to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've known people that all of a sudden it's like they discovered the rapture is not biblical, and they're like, I question everything.
Yeah.
You know, we're thinking about what people like Bart Ehrman are able to do with like talking about some of the changes and stuff like that in textual documents and scripture, and then all of a sudden so is this thing of doubt in people, and they're like, well, if I
How do I
can't
trust
trust
anything?
this, then I can't trust any of it. And
Of course, that
I think
leads
the
to
best
fear.
thing that we can do as a society is to say, I'm very confident in that. I like what N.T. Wright says, where he's like, I tell my students that 75% of what I say is accurate, 25% is wrong. The problem is I don't know which 25% is wrong.
I think that's really good.
I love that.
Yeah, J.P. Moreland does the same thing. He says that I'm about 60-40 on any topic.
Right.
And he goes, if I hang out with my old Earth Creationist friends, I'm 60-40 that way. If I hang out with my new Earth Creationist friends, I'm 60-40 that way. He says, I'm open to it. But yeah, so one of the...
And let me through this, like
Yeah.
N.T. Wright says that about the stuff that he's like spent his entire life studying. So he's talking about the expert level stuff.
Yes.
And this Oxford
That's how it should
professor.
be.
That's gotta go, that's gotta change when he's talking about, if N.T. Wright is talking about epidemiology, you know, like that's gotta change.
I trust a guy who says I'm sorry or apologizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way this is supposed to work in Western culture is, this is the way it's supposed to work in our government, is you present an idea, I present an idea, and we wrestle out, we fine tune that idea to get to a point where we can both go, yeah, okay, I think we can move forward with this one. And that's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way it should work, is we're supposed to have open discourse, right? The politicians are supposed to go, hey, here's my idea. And somebody's like, well, here, I challenge it with this idea. But instead
I want to shut you down, and I want to be the one. Right. And I want to win.
And then the other thing too is we have this, you talk about the knowledge thing, is people are like, okay, I don't know who to trust, so I'm just going to trust in this, and I'm going to double down on everything, and you can't move me. And then the problem is it creates cognitive dissonance because your philosophy doesn't make sense of life, and you have to reject things. You have to go, I don't know what that is, so I have to just completely reject it because it doesn't fit into my worldview, and you've rejected something that actually is beneficial to you because you don't know how to discern truth. And so you're saying, this has worked for me for 30 years. That's why some people never change for 30 years. They're like, I'm doing this because this is all I know that works. Which is, I'm so much more content in my life now that I have alleviated myself from allegiances to ideologies.
It's like why that quote was so powerful for me the first time I read it by C.S. Lewis when he says, my idea of God is not a divine idea. So I'm like, if your idea of God is not a divine idea, you know, like he said, talking about RZIM and like the experts that we think about, just like someone who's studied that their whole life, if they're not for certain about those things, like that just takes a weight off, you know? It's like you don't have to live up to that anymore of trying to figure out. It's like, and then what comes after that when he says it has to be shattered time and time again, that just shows like the repetitiveness of him continuing to search out God, like to seek out God. It's not like it ends there, that my idea is not enough. It's that I keep searching and then he shatters it again. I keep searching and he shatters it again.
It also, what you're saying with N.T. Wright and what you're saying there, it alleviates me to look at you as a human being that might have something valuable to give me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Instead of going, oh, I'm sorry, you're a Buddhist? Yeah, you have nothing you have is valuable to me. And actually, because you believe that, you're lesser.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start to judge
People.
all these people and giving, and then instead of going, oh, you might have something good. Examine all things. Keep the good and let go of the bad. So what do you have? Because you might have something good. I've studied world religions, and there's stuff in there going, ooh, you actually articulate that better than I've heard in Christianity.
Yep.
I'm going to keep that because that's good. You know? So.
Actually, we met a Christian Buddhist, as he called himself, in Costa Rica, and it was like the most incredible conversation that I had with him. It was awesome. Eden. His name is Eden. Isn't that cool?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a Christian Buddhist that we met. Well, I guess he was just a Buddhist in Nepal. Did we talk about the story?
Maybe.
We were walking
I
down the
don't
Monkey
remember.
Temple and Gautam.
Maybe. I think you've told me.
And the guy was like, and Gautam's like, I'm a Christian. And
Yeah.
he's like, oh, yes, Buddha and Jesus were brothers. And Gautam's like, no, they weren't. He got so pissed, like they were trying to take over Christianity, and it was very difficult for him to become a Christian, so he's very protective of his faith.
That's sweet. I love that.
I love this. Dostoevsky says enslavement to progressive fads. So again, this is not new, guys. There's nothing new about what's going on today. So the only thing that we can do, and actually he's going to talk about that here in just a second. We got to get to that. Okay, so let's all right, so
We might have to have another week.
Uh-oh.
I think
I was reading Victor Hugo Les Mis this
Uh-huh.
week,
Okay.
and he deals throughout the entire 1,300 pages with the question of revolution. And what went through my mind when you read that, and every revolution sees itself as progressive in some way.
Mm-hmm.
It's out with the old, in with the new. And he throws in a lot of warnings and stuff like that through all of that, but he does make this one thing that has given me a lot of thought this week. And he says every revolution is true. Every revolution is legitimate. And he connects it with the basic needs, the emotional needs of every revolution. And he's not saying every revolution is better, he's saying that there's something in every revolution that is legitimate itself, that
Yes.
whatever it is that's in power is completely ignoring. And of course, like, the power dynamics want to keep everything the way that it is because it works, because it keeps people in power, things like that. But, you know, like, Nina, you just brought up, like, Hitler, right? But, like, while what he was doing was seriously problematic, obviously, the needs of the people that they themselves ended up being mobilized for, those were legitimate things. It was poverty, it was hunger, it was, you know, death, it was sickness, it was all of these kind of things. And it's like, that's how revolutions get started. And I think that's important to recognize, like, in a world right now, which is like, we're dealing with all these things, we can kind of go like poo-poo on the new stuff because you're just being angry, you know, young militant progressives. But I think it's important to recognize, that there's obviously some need there that's not being met.
It's interesting.
Or hasn't been met.
I've been asking myself that question. What is it that we are, because those time periods when they had all these takeovers, there was like a lot of poverty.
Yep.
And I feel like we're not in an age of poverty. I mean, there's poverty, but we're not in an age of poverty. So what is it that we are lacking that makes us want to?
What if poverty isn't just of our like houses and
No, I mean, that's totally something, but it's like, it's usually a physical thing that we don't have. I mean, because I think we all, throughout history, we've struggled with poverty mindsets and those kinds of things. But that's a question for a bigger question.
I
for
think
another
what you
time.
said right there was fantastic. And you take away the transcendent from people. You take away objective morality and you make them be completely in charge of their salvation and everything about themselves, and says, no, you have to create yourself, and they can't do it. What do they have to hold on to?
See, and that's why, I mean, what you're saying, I think, is correct. It's more of like it's not so much like we're in a time where we're all physically, in this country at least, in need so much as we don't know who we are. We don't know what truth is. We've transformed like truth to my truth and celebrate everyone's different truths, and now nobody knows who they are anymore.
I say part of like the age of social media though is that an identity belongs in a square now, and we don't actually know it to ourselves.
Because we no longer have conversations with one another.
Yeah.
Most of us.
And so the diagnosis, what Randy, you're saying, the diagnosis is correct. We have these dispossessions.
Oh yeah.
What's the prescription?
Yeah, and that's the problem, is when anybody comes along and says, here's the solution to this, let's strip this away and put this in, is you're just going to run up against the same issues eventually. You know, that's why, you know, every president, you know, every time we think we found a messiah president, they turn out to be nuking somebody, you know, sending missiles at somebody in the Middle East.
This is
and
why
they're like, oh, you're all the same.
Wes and I have certain politicians that we like, and we're like, oh, they've done this. But I always say, I'm like, but I'll just keep you right here because eventually,
Which is where they should be.
And that's okay. It's not bad, but because you don't ever want to fully put your trust in any human politician or not. But there's people who are like, I like what this person has to say, but we've been disappointed by every single person in politics.
We're still selling weapons to Syria. I said, we're still selling weapons to Syria.
I wonder, like, so when you are putting up a solution, basically, and we're saying, like, we want to be okay with someone saying that they don't have all the answers, but we're seeking answers. But
Yeah, so this is
So
it's not supposed
Yeah.
to be easy. It's not supposed to be easy. And actually, the framers set the Constitution up so that in order to pass a law, it was actually very difficult.
yeah,
Because they knew that change and progress in a society should actually be slow. It shouldn't be fast.
Because what they came from was
the king going, now we're doing this.
The king
and then
says
suddenly he could
so.
change the whole landscape of this country by a simple strike of the pen. It should be a process of deliberation and debate and going, hey, let's look and see what other countries did. Now, so what he actually talks about here in a second, we're going to skip this part, but so Solzhenitsyn says, how do we find truth? How do we find the right prescription for the diagnosis? And he goes, you can actually do that by going into literature and art, and you can actually find, so you can go into literature and find, what did they do here? What worked? Oh, this actually worked there, this worked there. Go into history, this worked here, this didn't work there. And you should be able to aim better by going to those who came before you, instead of dismissing them and going, only things in the 21st century are important. Everything else is done away with because you guys are all idiots. Okay, boomer, get out of here. And you
Disregard
go,
it all.
oh, well, everybody's like, no, everything's coming to an end. And you go, oh, really? I went through Y2K. Oh, yeah, we went through global cooling, global warming, global cooling, ozone. We're all dead. Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, I've lived through, the Cold War. I'm sorry, I've lived through those things, and we're still here. The world's not falling tomorrow. You're like 10 seconds old. You should listen to somebody, but I should also,
Midwest right now.
but I should also be willing to look and hear your perspective because you might see things afresh. But it can't go against what has been tried for 10,000 years and is creative flourishing, which we can look in literature and art and history and find those things.
That's where the archetypes come.
That's where the archetypes come from.
Classic example, middle part.
Hey, I've had a middle part my whole life, and I was made fun of throughout school, and I still have
Middle
a middle
part.
part.
Listen,
I
middle
feel
down the
like
middle.
only
Couldn't do it.
Middle
It's
part.
come back in style.
So the middle part, like millennials apparently, is it millennial or Gen Z?
Gen Z.
Gen Z
Z.
is making fun of all the other millennials,
For
Gen
having
X,
a-
Which
for
is
having
part.
a side part. Middle part is obviously
Which was the
what looks
opposite when we were
good.
growing up.
And I think it's hilarious because we grew up with middle part.
Yeah,
And-
it's every other generation.
And I brought it up because they're like, this is the best thing, and you guys are all old, and that's why. And I'm like,
no
that's
idea.
hilarious. We did that already.
Yeah,
Come up with something new.
I was just around college students, and when they all came in like their early 2000s, low weight,
Low rise
I'm like,
jeans.
I just realized I hit that point in my life, like I'm not gonna change my style.
Where you're like, I
I'm
might
going
as well
back.
just wear what I want to
We're
wear.
not going back.
I can't do that. Their middle parts, they're like
This is why you
Curtain
understand.
bangs,
Curtain
curtain bangs.
That's why you understand the older generations because they're
But
like,
technically, I'm a Gen Z.
are you? Yeah, that
Barely.
does make
Like
sense.
by the hair on her head. Barely.
The hair in her head.
Barely.
But I just think that's like a fluffy example of all these things we think we know better when we're younger. We're so strong, and the older we get, the more we realize, hopefully, that we
So
don't
wisdom is
know
so
very
good.
much.
It's just like it's so funny though because in Christianity at least, or all religions probably, we seek out these people who are humility, like people who don't know it all, but we think they do because by them saying they don't know it all, that means they know it all.
They're like,
But then yet when people do say like for your faith, hey, I don't know about that, like that's something I'm still trying to figure out, you immediately get deemed as like, okay, we don't follow that person obviously now
Right.
because they're not sure, like they're not.
We're allowed to say
Firm.
I don't know.
And that's just something that's not looked. We want that in every other area of life, except when it comes to your religion or your spirituality.
Although it seems like every time someone, like, look at any celebrity and they're like, on a talk show, they're like, oh, this celebrity is like the most humble, kind, wonderful person. It's like they respect those people. And yet, I grew up being very proud and having a hard time being wrong. And I always respected the people who had humility. And something inside of me could not enter into that humility. Like, it didn't allow me because I was so scared of what it would make me look like.
I
if
think
were
it's
wrong.
earned wisdom. I think it's humiliation is what brings you there. I think when you've been humiliated by
You've been
something,
wrong enough.
yeah, then you feel that sense. It goes from being humble to being humiliated, and then you're like, I have no choice now because I know I don't know
That's
it all.
very
Like,
true.
there's so many things now that I've questioned because I don't know now.
I've been humbled many, many, many
But
times.
until you hit that point and go through that experience, you're not there. I don't know if you can.
I think it's good that he pointed out, like, without the hindsight of not just growing older, but suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Like he that specific term, I think, is important because I think it's when you encounter that suffering, again, like because your sense of identity, your sense of self is threatened, and going back to the beginning where it's you got to choose between envy and greed or fortitude. You only discover the truth through fortitude. You strip off what is unnecessary through fortitude.
So have any of these ideologies that the young zealots are putting forward, have they ever have before you tell me I'm wrong, show me that your philosophy has gone through suffering and come out and actually produced flourishing?
Yes.
Because it probably hasn't.
And that's why when so many people do go through those crises of faith, they actually come out stronger on the other end, even though they've stripped off a lot of those beliefs. They end up having a deeper conviction at the end. That's the ironic part about it all.
Every time I've stood on the precipice and walked away, I've become stronger and stronger.
Unless you're
It's like the less you know, the more resolute you are. That's how I've felt the last 2 years of my life. The less I've known, the more resolute I've become by not knowing anything.
That's a good quote.
oh, write it down.
That is interesting. I've been having a guy I talk with on Facebook, never met him in real life. He's like in Florida or something, as a random ad. But he's full on preterist, and so I'm just like,
What is he?
preterist, so like believing that.
I thought you said predator.
Predator.
I was like,
Yeah,
why
you
are you
was-
still
I was like, what's
engaging?
happening? I don't even know this guy. I've never seen him, never met him.
Well, it's interesting because he's so rude. I mean, he'll call me F, and it's it's
And he's
crazy.
still
He says he's
talking
a
to you.
believer, and
He's
it's
a
just the idea
Christian?
that Jesus already came back and fulfilled
Oh.
prophecy and everything. And,
Okay.
But it's actually challenged me. I'm like, I've always believed this, but let me go investigate, and I've actually come out stronger.
Yep.
I can't prove him wrong. He won't have it. He's too proud. But I'm like, I've actually grown from this.
Thank you.
I've told him that. I said, thank you.
So you should never be. I gained this about 10 years ago. I stopped being afraid of atheist arguments because I found out if there's something in it that's good, I can glean from it. If it's not, you've just found another way
To make me.
to prove that Christ exists. Like you've just proven there's another avenue. You can't. That's like no, this is a dead end.
Yep.
Wait, okay, let's go. No, that's a dead end. So you're actually limiting the amount of things.
Yep.
I was also going to say suffering doesn't always make you a better person. I mean, you've got to look at the Snapes. Now, granted, he had a good ending,
Yeah.
more or less.
How do you feel about this? We're not going to get on a tangent.
No.
We're not going to do that.
Yeah. Let's
We can talk about it after, but he was a horribly wicked person. I mean, he was sad and selfish and mean and angry.
it's
And
depending on how you.
him and Harry had the same childhood, more or less.
Yeah.
And they chose two different paths. So suffering, I think, brings a lot of. I mean, I think it's very scriptural. Like
will refine you
we
if you allow
thrive
it.
we thrive in
If you
suffering.
allow it, I like that.
That's
If
why
you allow it.
churches and persecuted churches thrive in suffering. What's going on?
You can say
I was gonna say, what's happening? I feel like everyone just got up.
What's going on?
Yes.
Oh,
I was like, what is happening? Everyone's getting up.
And this is a piano set.
oh.
It's a piano chair.
Oh, is it?
Piano chair.
There you go.
I'm like,
Hey, I'm skinny.
oh my god, I'm weird.
The window's open a crack.
Are we going to a book launch party?
I don't know.
I said we.
Guys.
Me and you? Sure.
No. All
We
of
can have a reading time, Nina. Just me and you.
of your book. I think there needs to be a launch party.
Yeah, there does.
Okay, maybe.
No, but
No, there needs to be a launch party.
Okay.
This is a big deal.
We'll discuss it
Just
after we.
because I just wanted to throw that before I
Okay.
forgot.
Okay.
Literally was thinking about it in the middle of the time. Like,
He's gone.
Randy?
Randy? So this brings up one of my favorite quotes, and I believe it's one of my favorites, but I think it's from Mark Twain. Mark Twain was credited with a lot of things that he didn't say, but I think this is one. He says, when I was 18, I thought my father was an idiot. By the time I turned 21, I was amazed at how much he'd learned in such a short time. Meaning that when we're younger, we think everybody older than us is idiots. When we gain a few years
I
on
definitely
us,
thought that.
we go, oh, he actually was right. Like he was much smarter than I thought he was, you know. And so
I heard that quote when I was a teenager, and I was like, "That's stupid." and
Here's the point.
I hated to acknowledge that it was true when I got older.
You said we're 10 seconds old. So it's like,
yeah.
It's true.
That was a good
That was
quote. We were 10 seconds old. That's funny.
So there's two things I want to hit, and we're going to get. The thing right he said just before that was the spirit of Munich did not disappear; it vacillates. So things keep coming back around. When we think so, one generation works to defeat bad philosophy. It sustains. We flourish. The next generation's entitled. They forget. They get complacent and lazy. And the next generation thinks because things are falling apart because one generation grows complacent, they're like, "Oh, it didn't work." It's not that it didn't work. It's that the aim got off. And once the political aim gets off, we see this in churches and everything where we have the correct aim and then we start going, oh, we're going to do this. And you're like, oh, the church is failing. No. Just the church started aiming incorrectly. This last thing, this has just been burned in my mind, page 37. Well, I'm going to say two quotes and then we're going to close it up. People will ask what literature can do in the face of pitiless assault of open violence. Well, let us not forget that violence does not have its own separate existence, and is, in fact, incapable of having it. It is invariably interwoven with the lie. They have the closest of kinship and the most profound natural tie. Violence has nothing with which to cover itself except the lie, and the lie has nothing to stand upon other than violence. Once someone has proclaimed violence as its method, it must inexorably select the lie as its principle. And at its birth, violence acts openly and even takes pride in itself. But as soon as it is reinforced and the position is strengthened, it begins to sense the rarefied atmosphere around it. And it can go further only when fogged about with lies. Cloaked in honeyed, hypocritical words, it does not always nor invariably choke its victims. More often, it demands them only the oath of the lie, only participation in the lie. Simply the ordinary courageous human being's act of not participating in the lie, of not supporting false action. What his stand says is, so be it that this takes place in the world, that it even reigns in this world, but let it not be with my complicity. Writers and artists have a great opportunity to conquer the lie.
I like that.
I mean, the honeyed hypocritical words, the lie is its principle, the violence is its method, and it's just a perpetual circular thing that's going on. And he said, "What? So the world's falling around you. The concentration camps are going on. What is your job? To not be complicit with the lie. To resist being complicit." And you go, wow. What is my job in the 21st century? Is as much as I can hold to truth, as Jordan-Peterson says, tell the truth.
At least
At
don't
least
lie.
don't lie. And like that is our only job in the 21st century, is not to propel the lie going forward. That it stops with you. Like, no, it doesn't go any further. As much as you can. Because there are an infinite number of facts. We can't know the truth about everything, but what we can discern, we need to hold fast and go, this is to this point, before the image is destroyed, this is what I know, and I can't be complicit any further than this, because this is all the information that I have. Once I gain more information, I can decide if I go right or left. I can recalibrate, but to this point, I won't be complicit. And I think that's fantastic. And can you read Can you read the last?
Last page.
Oh, so starting, because we read writers and artists have a greater
Okay,
opportunity.
go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
Writers and artists have a greater opportunity to conquer the lie. In battle with the lie, art has always been victorious, always wins out, visibly, incontrovertibly for all. The lie can stand up and win out over much in the world, but not over art. And as soon as the lie is dispersed, the repulsive nakedness of violence is exposed, and violence will collapse in impotence. That is why, my friends, I think that we are capable of helping the world in its white-hot hour of trial. We must not reconcile ourselves to being defenseless and disarmed. We must not sink into a heedless, feckless life. but go out to the field of battle. In the Russian language, there are some favorite proverbs on truth. They express enduringly the immense folk experience and are sometimes quite surprising. One word of truth outweighs the whole world. And so it is that my own activity is founded on so apparently fantastic a violation of the law of the conservation of energy and mass, as is my appeal to the writers of the whole world. Damn.
That's why I love doing art, doing film, some motion pictures. So I take some writings and I make it real life, and make it play out, drama. It's a really cool thing, though. It's like, yeah, I've been actually trying to think of film ideas in the last year now. Like, how do you tell the
It's the
truth?
greatest gift in the world. We don't deserve it, but we have it.
That's a good question.
One word of truth outweighs the entire world. I mean, that just, that whole last 2 pages, well, every page of this book is just a gut punch of, even if you don't agree with it, it's worthy. This book is worthy to be wrestled with by every generation. I think every person, it's worthy of your time to sit down and wrestle the 38 pages and go, this guy suffered. This guy's earned some wisdom. What can I learn from him?
It feels so beyond relevant. It's just like everything he says, it's like, oh, that's today. Oh, that's today. Oh, that's good.
It's like you got people on the street saying, basically there's not going to be any peace, until they find justice. And it's like violence is intertwined with that lie. It's like, how is that the answer? How is not relenting in violence going to bring about peace? It's wild. Yeah.
Well, violence, once the lie is exposed, violence, he says, becomes impotent. It's naked. It's vulnerable. It's because without the lie, it has no veil. It has no covering. Jesus says, if I would not have come, they would not have sinned. But now that I've come, they have no cloak. They have no covering for their sin.
Expose them, yeah.
Because light exposes dark, right? Once the truth is spoken, they actually have credited Solzhenitsyn with helping bring down Stalin by simply writing truth. Once the Gulag Archipelago got out,
Like this
USSR started to crumble because the truth began to be exposed, and then the violence became impotent, and it just began to collapse once the lie was revealed. And so,
Like you said, no matter what you believe about this, it's like things like this that are worthy of being wrestled out usually unveil some layer of truth that you didn't see. Whether it's your own religion or a different religion or something, you can find something that points you closer to the belief that you hold, if you're holding on to the truth. And so that's what I think about this. Like, no mention of spirituality really in the book, but everything about spirituality in the book.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So good.
one of the goals here for Randy and I in this, and what we actually expect of you guys as well, when we present a book to you, what we're saying is, I have loved this book. It has taught me something. Let me share it with you. Maybe you'll love it too. So that's the whole purpose of this, is to go, I think this is worthy of your time and your energy. I don't think we brought anything to you guys that we were like, this might be okay. But everything we brought to you.
Hey, even Flatlands, I read that thing.
Stop it.
And I learned from it.
Now the thing was that did not come from Randy and I. That came from one of the members who it was Adam.
Oh.
But he brought passion and he loved the book. So he
I learned something from it 100%.
Oh, it was amazing. Like,
yeah.
I learned nothing.
The transpositional nature of it, it fit right into what we were
If we
doing.
didn't read transposition, I probably would have dismissed it.
I'm
But
actually reading a book about multiverse from a Christian perspective, and they use Flatlander in there.
Really?
So it's very interesting.
he did his best. He gave it his best go. Whatever his name was.
He reminded me of the German theologian Richard Niebuhr. Wasn't that the one that was killed?
Bonhoeffer.
He won't be. Oh yeah,
Dietrich
Bonhoeffer.
Bonhoeffer.
That's one I'm thinking of.
His book, Life Together, is great.
Niebuhr was killed? No.
Yeah, Bonhoeffer.
Edwin A.
I forgot
Abbott.
his name.
Him, Edwin A.
It
Abbott.
is one of those German guys.
You remember because his name is Edwin Abbott.
Edwin
And
Abbott.
the A stands for Abbott. And his last
Really?
name's Abbott,
So his
yes.
middle name's Abbott and his last name's Abbott? I should have
Edwin
known.
Abbott.
That would be an interesting read.
So, next week,
Yeah,
I
what's
think,
next?
this is just, I love this story because it is, we don't even know who the author is. It is so old.
What is it?
It is so ancient of a writing that actually fueled Tolkien,
We talked about
Beowulf.
Beowulf. We talked
It is the quintessential fantasy epic tale. It's just
Was it 8,500 somewhere around there? It was written in like 500.
something. Yeah, they think something around that in the first within the first millennia
Yeah.
of AD. It was written, and it's just archetypally so rich and deep. And so it actually, Tolkien pulls a lot from Beowulf. He was a Beowulfian scholar, and so he pulls a lot from. He has many mentions of allusions to Beowulf in Lord of the Rings. I know Beorn, the Hobbit. Beorn is called Bilbo.
Bilbo's from Beowulf, inspired by Beowulf?
He's the thief. Remember.
Yeah.
So one interpretation of Beowulf is the bee thief, and so Bilbo's in there, Beorn is in there, and there are probably other illusions that I'm forgetting right now. Huh?
Dragon and Grendel.
Yeah. Yes, the dragon and
Is it
Grendel.
just a one book? Is it just one book?
It's one story, and
Okay.
it's more of a poem.
Okay.
And there are two editions you could read. I actually haven't read this edition yet. It's the Tolkien version. And I think we should probably read that one. But Seamus Heaney has an incredible one, which he has the Old English, and then he has the English translation to it. So you get to see what the words used to look like, and it's just so cool.
It's so different.
Yeah, it's very, very different. But I think you're going to enjoy the story, and there's so much to pull apart in it. It's not a hard read. It's a classic story.
Seamus.
Yeah, Seamus Heaney. But go for the
Get
Tolkien
the Tolkien
one.
one. Okay.
Get the Tolkien version because of where we are at Lewis Tolkien Society. I think that goes without saying. But yeah, guys, this has been a great start to the year. Thank you for indulging me. I had somebody ask me the other day, like, how did you get them to read Solzhenitsyn? Like, how did you con people into reading a book? And I was like, well, I guess they trust me.
Yeah, it's a good read.
So
I like it.
we'll have more things like this to read throughout this year, and it's just going to be fantastic. I have enjoyed being here. This is exciting, being in this room. I can't wait to see it when it has all the books and everything in here. I just love books.
Yeah.
I love books. Being around them.
6 weeks, hopefully.
6 weeks.
Send out an email,
6 to 8 weeks.
so like to the group that says when you need help or something, or your phone. I don't know. I have your number, but just so we can. Because I'd like to come up on a weekend or something.
You could even set up like kind of community volunteer time at the new Drinklings or something like that.
Oh, you could put it on a calendar and send it out. They could.
I mean, just not even just for us, but for
Yeah.
people in Wilmore and beyond. Because I mean, I'm just thinking about how it was done before. I know with Cup of Commonwealth, people brought chairs and stuff. That's why they had all these mismatched chairs at
Yeah.
Cup of Commonwealth, and then of course Holler, where everyone came and helped.
Oh yeah, we did some fun stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just
The only
said,
thing is my insurance guy said I'm not sure that we can cover volunteers.
You getting hurt here, you mean?
Yeah.
Sign a waiver.
I was gonna say
Less
just have
labor
a sign
intensive.
waiver.
Yeah,
I'll
wait,
sign
just-
my life away.
yeah.
I'll sign it.
Yeah, I'm good with small people that.
I got you. I got
but
what
if
you're
it's
saying.
open to the community. And
Yeah,
like, oh, yeah.
true.
Someone doesn't know how to use a drill, then we're screwed.
Yeah, somebody would come in here and be like, I know.
yeah, I don't think Chocolate Holler had that.
No, I guess
They
we
just
did.
did it anyways.
Yeah. All right, I want to close it out. We can talk some more, but this has been the last day, part 5 of Solzhenitsyn's 38-page lecture, and we left out about 3 or 4 VFFs worth of material that just could have been so good, but we need to move along to something else. Read the book yourself many times. I think it's definitely worth the read.
All right, so further up,
Further in.
further in.